Hi, today I will detail how I created and completed my first game for Minijam in 3 days using Godot. Little bit about me. You can call me Arnakai, and I am a backend developer. Initially, I went into programming with the desire to develop games and create memorable worlds, but the path led me down the backend road. Sometimes I opened the game jam page on itch.io, but all I saw were week-long game jams, which was a significant commitment for me. But then I saw a 3-day mini jam. I can handle that, said the confident boy. The theme? Shopping with a card as a mechanic limitation. The first day is already here, so as a fully prepared and organized individual, I slept through the first half of the day and spent the second half brainstorming ideas. At first, I thought of making a game about a bartender, where you work in a tavern, go down to the cellar for ale, and fight off skeletons. Then, after discussing the theme with my homie Old Elise, she suggested making a game about a looter in a
thrift.
As I said, a game about a looter in a
thrift
store who wants to grab the best clothes in a race against an experienced looter. I decided to think it over, and while watching the bird, an idea came to me. There is a doctor too old to deliver healing herbs, and his patients are too sick to fetch them themselves. You play as a bird that collects the necessary herbs and delivers them to the sick. Since you're a bird, you can't communicate what's wrong with the patient, so you use punch cards of pain, where patients indicate their illnesses, and the doctor provides the needed medicine based on this. Ideas and interesting mechanics were already flying around in my head, but let's take it step by step. I set up the project structure, created a ball, and started creating the character. First, I took project like Kenny's starting FPS project to understand how to work with the camera properly, but soon realized I had no idea how to make the camera interact with the environment and not go through walls. So I searched and found a great plugin, Phantom Camera. After watching some tutorials and copying their third-person camera example, the camera work was done. There was one problem. The camera is processed in process, while character movement is in physics process, causing jittering. They solved this by interpolating the global transform from the physical body to the visual part. I think there is a better solution, but if it works, don't touch it, as they say. The implementation surely won't come back to bite me later. After the camera, I started working on interactions. They consist of two nodes, interaction ray and interactable. Both serve the same purpose. Interactable indicates when an object can be interacted with, and interaction ray checks if there is something in front of the camera that can be interacted with. I searched for a free bird model, but couldn't find anything suitable until I saw a fantastic asset pack by Acornbringer for $2, which had many wonderful animals, but most importantly, a wonderful bird with 11 animations. Importing it into Godot, I encountered a couple of problems. Problem number 1. The bird is extremely small. Solution: I simply increased its scale. But remember the code that applies the transform from the physical body to the model? Scale is a part of the transforms, so the model's scale was overwritten. And what solution did this big brain come up with? Hard coding the scale. Problem number 2. It spun endlessly, something I didn't notice until I switched the model from a ball to an actual bird. And what solution did this be? Yes, you're right, hard coding the rotation to the camera. I wasn't very satisfied with my solutions, wanting smooth model rotation. More importantly, my little brain didn't understand how basis works at all, so I watched tutorials. Understanding nothing, I pathetically tried to force it to work. One apparent solution was to redo the transform assignment, but all my attempts were in vain. If I use this implementation, I need to hardcore scale and rotation. If I remove it, the model starts jittering. I found some possible reasons for the jitter: the aforementioned processing of the camera in process and the character in physics process, some floating point issue, velocity limit. Having spent too much time unsuccessfully fixing this, I give up and ended the work for the day. If you know a better solution or the reason this happens, let me know in the comments. Maybe you're thinking, Arnakai, it's already the third day and you've done almost nothing. Did you plan it all out and finish everything else in 3 to 5 hours? I added the Terrain 3D plugin to create the world and went searching for textures. Finding textures for grass and mountains, I wasn't too happy with them, so I used my Nano-Mega 42069 artist skills and drew them myself in Paint. We won't talk about that. Then I found 3 models of trees and rocks created by Broken Vector, as well as houses and people by CraftPix. All links will be in the description. I only needed the models of people for size comparison. I created a separate scene and eyeballed it to ensure everything looks right. Then I started adding lights to the windows. I had no idea what I was doing, so the first thing I did was change the window texture color from black to orange. This affected some parts of the house, but it wasn't noticeable enough for me to do anything about it. Then I placed 2 Omni lights 3D on each window and repeated this for all windows on all houses. Next, I wanted to deal with the grass. Seeing that Terrain 3D doesn't support grass out of the box, I switched to H-Terrain by Zealand. Adding a grass model which I yoinked from stay-at-home dev tutorial, I discovered it was white and didn't respond to the material or shader specified for the grass. I tried tinkering with the shader used by default in H-Terrain, but since I absolutely had no idea what I was doing, naturally nothing worked. I tried simply generating a terrain mesh and covered it using Multimesh Instance 3D, but it turns out horribly and uncontrollable. So I scrapped the idea of grass entirely because I had already spent too much time on it. At the time of making the video, I found working options with the Scatter or Godot Spatial Gardener, but I still need to play around with them. So if you want to see a video about grass, let me know in the comments. I still need to figure it out. After the grass failure, I knew the world looked empty and mega scuffed, so I added a pixel shader to hide these issues a bit. Next, we had an adventure with animations. But there was one problem. The models were created for Unity, and all the animations were in one track. Fortunately, I found a text document with frames for each animations that the author attached to the models because someone had already tried to import them into Unreal with the same problem. But they were incorrect, so I had to go frame by frame and write down the animations manually. This took about 2.5 hours, but it was worth it, and now we need to start with the animation tree. Understanding how the animation tree works took some time and a tutorial. I absolutely disliked the implementation, but I wasn't going to redo it correctly. Setting up transitions where needed in the code, the job was done. I didn't like the speed in flight and working with the same, so I added 3 different states: on the ground, close to the ground and high up, with different physics and speed applied. The houses looked too identical, so I created a separate texture for each house and applied them individually. Around 3 AM, Elise checked on what I was doing and offered to help by drawing the punch card. I explained how I envisioned it and she got to work. While Elise was drawing the card, I started working on the dialog UI. It was a global script with 3 signals: message, show card and hint, to which the corresponding UI elements subscribe. I took a random picture from the internet and stretched as the background for the text, found a 3-pixel font and the UI was ready. By this time Elise had finished the card and I started setting up how it works. It took some time to beat the UI in Godot, but eventually it was ready too. Next I worked on quests. I wrote hard-coded data for the houses and made a simple quest generation for each house. Because of how much time other things took, the main game loop was just fetch and deliver in a cycle. I knew this was terrible, but the goal was to finish the game for me. Then I worked on house interactions. I simply added a collision box on a separate layer, assigned it to each house and updated the quest when you interacted correctly. It was just a giant match case. Now I just needed to polish what I could and a game over screen, test the game and build it for the first time in my life. At 8 AM, with the sun shining in my face, I figured out the build settings, added controls in the top of the right corner, generated a name for the game using the last active brain cell, realized I needed a cover for the game, so I just went in and screenshotted the bird against the house, checked the game on the last time and uploaded the archive. I was 3 hours late for the deadline, so I left a message about the late submission and went to sleep. The next day, other participants left comments, and since the game jam allowed changes during the voting period, I made some tweaks based on the feedback. I added music, more trees, more houses, wing sounds, and additional animations. Later on, Ultilis drew an amazing logo for the game. The people in the game jam were very kind and pointed out the flaws in the game, and the community here is just wonderful. In the end, I took 22nd place, out of 55 entries. Considering it was my first game and all the craziness I've described, I think it's a pretty fair place. I still have a lot to learn. A 3-day game jam as a first project is very exhausting, especially when you're an unorganized goofball, but it was worth it. It made me learn new things, prioritize correctly, and understand what to focus on first. If you want to start making games, game jams are a great start because they give you a time limit and a goal. If you watched until the end and enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment on what you'd like to see next. Bye bye!